Hey, good morning. It's Patrick Level Truth Bomb riffing at approximately 10 a.m. my time on Thursday, September 7th, 2023. And hey, guys, look, I've just got to, I, we've got to have this sort of coming together. All right. Look, everything that I've been telling you, everything that I've been trying to get your attention about, everything that I've been trying to elevate above the noise and the madness of this cacophony of just insanity of lies is just biblical, is what it is. And everything that I've been trying to tell you, everything that I've been bringing to you day in and day out through these truth bomb riffs, and everything that I've done to bring you the work, my work, our work at www.thecon.tv, and also our work at the New Untouchables, real progressives. Just do a Google search. You put those two things together, and then I think I'm up to like a 408 of these truth bomb riffs on YouTube and also on TikTok. And in TikTok, I've reached over 7.5 million views, which have really translated to no real action. And I've gotten, I don't know, up to like I can't even remember what my number is. In fact, I'll look it up right now. Let's just do a quick one. Patrick Level Truth Bombs the Con. How many followers do I have? I have at this stage 655. Wow, how about that? I had way over 5,000 followers on Facebook, but I stopped doing Facebook because a long time ago I realized Facebook's algorithms is just designed to make us happy, be some sort of springboard stimulus of how the good life lives. And let's make believe that everything's cool. And they try to, bring back, turn down the volume on all of the, sort of, what am I looking for? Conflict, quite frankly, and everything that takes place in the political arena. And so there's really no social media platform outside of X where a lot of this stuff is appropriate, but X is insanity. Okay. And, let me try to finish my thought about some of the other social media networks. I mean, Facebook, of course, live the good life, your family, pictures of dogs, cats, really cool things, people doing great things. Okay, awesome, whatever. TikTok is designed really, and it works miracles in terms of, to get you out of the ether and entertained. And like, you see crazy people doing crazy things and amazing humans and superhumans and beautiful people and tricks and rock and roll stars. And its algorithms are designed to like what your personal tastes are. And like I've said on many of these truth bombs, you can look at some of that stuff and be absorbed in it for like 20 minutes. I've set my timer on TikTok so I don't spend any more than 10 minutes on it because it's useless. But trying to get the messages through, all of this incredible noise, it's impossible for something that is so central to everything that we all depend on. And, going through the other checklist of social media, I mean, Instagram is about the beautiful people or the superheroes amongst us that can do the greatest, for me, I love watching surfing and snowboarding and, all sorts of manner of extreme sports and skateboarding and that sort of thing. And, it's fantastic, but it's just not a place to connect vis-a-vis, what, quite frankly, Elon Musk had proclaimed that he wants X to be the world's town square. And, so ultimately, I saw this transition with X when Elon bought it. Like, I think I got onto Twitter in 2012 when I first was starting my journey, when I got involved with the Occupy Wall Street movement, and I ended up making my first documentary that ended up leading to my work on the con. But at that time period, I never really used Twitter. I didn't get Twitter. I remember seeing all sorts of manner of like important journalists that were using Twitter throughout the years, but I myself never engaged with Twitter, and I wasn't involved with Twitter until we released our work, The Con, in, let's see, was it November of 2020, right before the election, right? Or during the election, I should say, that led to the insurrection and everything else. But that was the first time I started getting involved. And in my first round of people that were following me and I was engaging with are some of the top journalists in our country. I mean, they are the top journalists in our country. And so, I had just a small sort of bailiwick of the most credible people in media that were in sort of my, I guess, social sort of construct. And interestingly enough, one of the most important documentary filmmakers of the last 15, 20 years. A guy by the name of Alex Gibney is one of my Twitter connections, and he was watching my stuff and I was watching his stuff. And it turned out I understood ultimately why he was paying attention to me, because he and a guy that I like to refer to as Squid Boy, David Sirota being, the sort of chieftain behind The Lever, which is a, progressive platform, but at the same time, really, he's most known for being, I think, like a communications writer for Bernie Sanders and working within the Beltway for a long time. But then ultimately, his most impressive success, as far as I'm concerned, was the movie Don't Look Up, which he co-wrote with Adam McKay. And it was genius. It was fantastic. I absolutely thought that film really personified everything that was going on. And so I had a begrudging sort of respect for Sirota, because I had been watching David Sirota on Twitter for some time, where I thought he was actually pursuing the story that I was engaged in. And I had made The Con, and I was deeply engaged with trying to get The Con released and then ultimately create season 2 of The Con that ironically were the answers to all of the questions that I started off my journey to begin with. But it was such a massive sort of effort that had to like reconstruct the last 40 years of policy and everything that went into understanding what created The Con. We were never able to get season 2 off the ground because of everything that I'm trying to reveal to you. We live in this mammoth, insane time period where oligarchs and billionaires have been able to completely control the global system of information and everything else based on buying systems, particularly our government. And everybody knows that, the system is rigged, the system is corrupt. But like I've said for now years, that, without the knowing the who, why, and the what, and the when, without the details, you're lost in translation and you can never peg it. And nobody, I'd say a vast majority of the United States has no idea. Our population has no idea how laws work. They have no idea how our system is supposed to function. They have no idea what's taken place to create the world we live in. And that's why The Con at www.thecon.tv is so mammothly vital and important, because it's the blueprint for how this whole system works. I remember, for a while there were some journalists that were like, yeah, everybody knows the answers to everything that took place during the financial crisis, and nobody has a fucking clue. Most notably, these morons, I used to have a great deal of respect, and I do for the most part. I love comedians. Why? Because I love to laugh. And comedians are incredibly observant and, very clever and thoughtful, and they think about things. But there was this sort of, movement to comedians because mainstream media had become such a joke that the comedians were the only ones that are actually asking the pertinent questions, and they had the skill set to make us laugh and think about things. But it started to manifest in these 3 particular comedians that started to get giant audiences. The first, of course, was Joe Rogan. Now, my personal feeling towards Joe Rogan is that I've always liked Rogan from the very beginning. The Comedy Store, the stuff he was involved with, the UFC, the questions he was asking, being interested in UFOs and UAPs and everything that he did with all of those guys that have led to mammoth revelations and all sorts of other things. But, just questions. I mean, it just reminded me of dudes I hung out with growing up, where we'd listen to Rush in the garage, smoking a bunch of fucking, big fat joints and like playing darts and then playing around on motorcycles. That was kind of like my upbringing and that sort of thing. And I was heavily into punk rock and skateboarding, but it was the same sort of thing back in my time period, X generation, where, yeah, man, we were kind of like off the heels of the late 60s and all that turmoil with the hippie movement and the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement and everything else. And we were all trying to find kind of a place and like what it was all about. And then we had this evolution from, the go-go 80s, which really ushered in everything that I'm revealing to you and then some. But Joe Rogan was always, just in my estimation, a dude that was asking legitimate questions. The bigger and bigger his audience got, the more and more he got, I don't know, in some ways, the only thing that I have a real massive criticism about Rogan is his interplay with Alex Jones. I think he just played with Alex Jones because he liked to get high and watch how fucking freakish Alex Jones was. But then it turns out that, Alex Jones at the beginning, when Alex Jones was asking questions about, weapons of mass destruction and why we went to war in Iraq, and he was pursuing this stuff, but then it ended up becoming all things conspiracy theory, to the point that, when he was dealing with Sandy Hook, he just started making up like insane false flag operations that were basically undermining the tragedy of children being slaughtered by a deranged lunatic who got weapons of mass destruction because of the nature of our non-regulatory body within the Second Amendment and everything that's been involved with for decades. And so this guy starts to create this hysteria of this undercurrent of people that are so ultra paranoid of everything in the vacuum of legitimate power that they started to create this groundswell of everything as a conspiracy. Now, meanwhile, what I've brought to you is the largest criminal conspiracy in the history of the world. But I don't do it shooting my mouth off. I don't do it without evidence. I don't do it without knowing exactly what it's all about. I spent years and years and millions of dollars going to the most credible sources and tens of thousands of hours of research to be able to understand the subject of which I was trying to resolve the answers, which I did. And as I've mentioned to you many, many times, I mean, the sum total of the government apparatus within the regulatory body and law enforcement of the United States and the institutions that are tasked to prevent the insanity that's come forward, I've learned that the regulatory bodies like the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency that are supposedly regulating our national banks, and the FBI and their white-collar fraud division, and the Department of Justice white-collar fraud division, and so on and so forth, that all of these apparatuses, these agencies, and more that I've mentioned, operate north of $90 billion a year, and they have tens of thousands of employees. Okay, that's ginormous. But media has tens of thousands of employees and billions of dollars of operating revenue. And I'm talking about Fox, I'm talking about MSNBC, I'm talking about CNN and so forth. And none of them could answer the questions that I was experiencing myself going through the 2008 great financial crisis. And I'm a producer. And I've been a producer for a long time. Now, my bailiwick and my expertise was mostly entertainment and action sports and, film and television. But I studied political science, and I've always had a significant interest in how things operate and power and all of those sorts of things. And I've always had a fixation and quite frankly, an obsession with all things that led to the rise of the Third Reich and World War II primarily. One of the reasons was because my grandfather fought on the Battle of the Bulge, and I heard war stories growing up through my father, and all of the great sacrifices of really everybody who merged to defeat the Third Reich, and that was the side I was on. And I always had this sort of inner strength of Americans get it right, that we are what ultimately, ironically, George Bush would say is the shining city on the hill. And of course, he came out of the CIA, and I know how many strange questions revolve around that, and ultimately, George W. after the fact. But what I'm trying to tell you is that I always had a centerpiece, right? That American liberty and justice was absolute strength, and it depended upon the integrity of its institutions and smart people. Like I grew up with the character Bugs Bunny, which was always, what's up, Doc? He was a wise ass. He always knew what whoever he was up against was up to, right? He could just figure things out. That was the idea of the character. Yeah, is it childish to think about that? Absolutely. But the psychology of it was something that, it had huge influence on me and my generation, as well as, Popeye, right? Open up a can of spinach and whoop ass on Bluto, the big bully. I mean, it was those sorts of heroic, nothing's going to intimidate you as an American. Nothing's going to outwit you. Nothing's going to outsmart you because you're smart. Because you've got this liberty sort of, virtue approach to the whole system, and you'll work your way through it. And then everything in media that I grew up with, basically personified that and told us amazing stories, most of the time about superheroes and everything else that would kind of ultimately have that sort of psychological imprint on you that, yeah, man, being an American meant being courageous. And it also meant being smart. My favorite movie of all time was Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it's my favorite film of all time for many reasons. But the best scene in that movie, and I've seen it 100 times plus, is when Salah, the Egyptian cohort who was helping Indy find the Ark, they go to this specialist who's reading the Staff of Ra, who is this old wise man who understands how to actually interpret the hieroglyphics that were on the Staff of Ra. And they realize that you have to have both sides of the staff to understand exactly where the Ark of the Covenant was buried. And they proclaim right in that moment, if you've seen the film, and I'm sure many of you appreciated it like I did, when Sulla grabs the dates because the monkey poisoned it and almost killed Indy, and they both realized at that moment the Nazis were digging in the wrong place. That's what I've been telling you about the nature of corruption from the beginning of us revealing the con. I've had this information and I've known this stuff for now the last 13 years. And what's been playing out and what's insane and what validates everything that I'm trying to tell you. I started with this notion of social media and independent guys, and I started with Joe Rogan. My point was to get from Joe Rogan to Russel Brand and to Jimmy Dore, among others, these really witty comedians that just are their minds move a mile a minute, and they're hilarious, and they've got great judgment. They've great observation skills, but what they're not are investigative journalists. And yet, because of the vacuum of all of the mistakes mainstream media continues to make, these sorts of vectors, if you will, in independent media found audiences of tens of millions of people because they were asking questions. And then they were actually being, professing satire or doubt about things that millions of other people do. So they could kind of mold the narrative. And at first, it looked like they were all going the right way. And I thought, wow, when we were releasing the con, here's a situation where there were going to be these stepping stones where, we'd easily get on Joe Rogan. We'd easily get on Russel Brand. Jimmy Dore would be all over this. But I found that all of those doors were closed. And I kept thinking to myself, what the fuck? And by the way, personal story, I was involved in many conversations with the gatekeepers for Joe Rogan and Russel Brand. Joe Rogan's, point guy, I've talked with him, I don't know, maybe 30 times over the course of the last several years via email mostly. I think I had 2 phone conversations with him. And interestingly enough, I ended up having a phone conversation with Matt Taibbi after he was actually a guest on Joe Rogan back in, I think it was 2019. I think we celebrated the 10-year collapse of Lehman Brothers, and Matt Taibbi was giving his shtick to Joe Rogan, and both of them are from Massachusetts, so they've got Boston area, so they probably got a lot in common. And yeah, Matt Taibbi at that time I thought was the best journalist there ever was in this space, because he is the guy who inspired me because of his work at Rolling Stone, because he was like revealing these insane levels of fraud and maneuvering by these too big to fail banks, that were involved with the 2008 great financial crisis through this illustrious work that I, when looking back, felt like, for those of you who are connoisseurs of music, it's like looking back at like your favorite album. For me, like it feels like looking back at like Led Zeppelin 4 or, I don't know, Stairway to Heaven, Houses of the Holy. You think of all of these time periods where people were making just incredible work, and you have a fondness if you have like a love and an expertise of that thing. That's how I feel about Matt Taibbi. Great respect for the work that he did. But Matt Taibbi now has become part of this sort of network of, and these guys are smart enough to do it, but at the same time it's backfired, because Matt Taibbi and Russel Brand and Joe Rogan and Glenn Greenwald, right? And Joe and I always put Jimmy Dore in the way back, because I always thought Jimmy Dore was a hanger-on anyway, and I don't think Jimmy Dore's that funny. Sometimes I do, but I always thought he was a guy that would run his mouth off, and some things he got right and some things he got incredibly wrong. But again, all of those guys, some total, act as if everybody knows what happened in the 2008 great financial crisis, and they don't. But yet they are always asking questions like the mainstream is lying to you, the mainstream's this and that. But then they morphed into their own mainstream, and they all became like this sort of thing where they had put up on a pedestal, Tucker Carlson. Because Tucker Carlson in the primetime slot on Fox, started doing things. And I remember reluctantly having some interest in Tucker a long time ago, because he and his team did some really, really amazing work on private equity. And so I knew he was, capable of asking some really good stuff. And I found out later that I think he went to Yale Law School, possibly. He came out of an Ivy League, and I knew he was pretty intelligent, but I never trusted him at all. And then, I started to see what Tucker was involved with at that time period during the insurrection. And then, of course, all of the elements that came out during the Dominion lawsuit, where Tucker was saying things behind the scenes like, I hate Trump and I can't believe this guy and he's taking everybody down and blah, blah, blah. But meanwhile, he's playing the game. Now, then we see in the aftermath, that McCarthy, Speaker of the House McCarthy, gives Tucker, 5,000 hours of footage from Congress that he cherry picks, and I know how to do this because I'm a producer myself. He cherry picked the footage to make it look like the MAGA sort of revolt was like a walk in the park, and they were there just demonstrating, free speech and this and that. Meanwhile, we all know, especially as we're seeing all of these convictions of these, particularly the Proud Boys, right? 22 years yesterday, and 17 years a couple of days before, with all of the leaders of the Proud Boys. And Tucker is basically reconfiguring things, which is just an outright, straight up lie that we can all observe. And then all of a sudden he gets ejected from Fox, right? And then shortly thereafter, it was right at the same time, Fox, Mr. Papa Murdoch, who created this whole thing off the heels of Roger Ailes, and at that time period during Nixon, wanted to create a conservative sort of media to somehow, I guess, provide an alternative to it. At that time, they considered liberal academic media, but Fox came into being and really went big during the Gulf War after 9/11. Meanwhile, never bringing us the details of 9/11, although they started to ask questions about Saudi Arabia, but then it got lost in the mix and all sorts of weird shit happened after the fact. But Rupert Murdoch admits in making the decision to pay Dominion the voting boost in that massive libel suit. They paid $787 million. And as I've demonstrated to you before, by the way, in the subpoenas, Rupert Murdoch said, yeah, our business model is to lie. And if you look at the actual operating revenue of Fox, I think it was in 2022, their operating revenue, their operating budgets were 11 something billion, and their operating revenue was 14.7 billion. So they had like a 3.7 billion, profit in 2022. And of course, when you think about that in context to however many years before of playing this lie vector, honestly, $787 million was probably worth it to Murdoch. I'm sure it was very painful. I don't think that guy likes to let 1 cent go, let alone $787 million. But meanwhile, then all of a sudden Tucker's fired. And all the speculation from the likes of, I'm thinking of his Twitter handle, Rusty Rockets, which is Russel Brand. And then, of course, Aaron Mate and guys like Glenn Greenwald and Jimmy Dore and, the other guy, Max Blumenthal, who were all anti-war and anti-Ukraine, but, they all seem to be in the pockets of, Putin and, to a lesser degree, Bobby Kennedy Jr. But all of these guys were putting credibility into Tucker Carlson because they were riding the MAGA, clickbait wave, and they were in the wake, and they were all building their audience, telling people what they wanted to hear, playing this strange game, including Matt Taibbi, and maybe most importantly Matt Taibbi, because Matt Taibbi goes and he does the Twitter files with Elon Musk, and it's absolutely clear to me now that Elon Musk was like, hired gun, and here's some information, and we can make it out that, yeah, they were, censoring the information because Donald Trump, obviously was purged from Twitter under the leadership of Jack Dorsey and, all of their people and so forth. And, and of course, all of the things happened that led to, Elon buying Twitter. And I was very interested and hopeful that, what Elon was going to do was going to be very good for people like me to tell the truth in a massive sort of, town square like way where we could all battle it out. I'm all about free speech, right? I can overcome free speech and lies and deception and all sorts of tweakers, and I can engage that all day, every day. And I figure that's the way the playing field should be. Quite frankly, again, I come from this background where I was a total, rugby playing, football, punk rock skateboarder guy. Trust me, I'm not afraid of conflict. I've been doing it my whole life, right? So I'm like, look, whatever, fuck, people can have their thoughts on anything. Just like if they want to buy a specific album, they want to go to church, or they want to go smoke pot, or they want to do this, they want to do that, they want to be gay. I could care less. I'm all about freedom and liberty for all. It's when you break the law, and then of course, if you manipulate free speech to be libel or defamation, and then you do it on a mass level, it becomes propaganda. And above all else, I hate fascism above all else. I hate corruption and fascism above all else. My entire platitude, my entire platform, everything that I'm trying to get to you is that corruption births and fuels fascism. And who am I? I'm Patrick fucking Lovell. I'm not Moses, I'm not Jesus, but I will tell you, I can lead you I can create the exodus from corruption, and I can create the resurrection of the American dream. If millions of you would join me, if millions of you would invest in what I'm giving you, because of, I got to tell you, the ultimate revelation happened in this stupid interview that Tucker Carlson did with what is the guy's name? I'm gonna look it up real quick because this is the first time I've ever heard of this guy, Larry Sinclair. Okay, so Tucker Carlson does this interview with this guy Larry Sinclair, this freak. Oh my God, was he a freak? I watched this. I saw it pop up on my Twitter feed a couple of days ago, or X feed. To make the proclamation that this guy said that he had sex with Barack Obama. I'm like, oh my God, you've got to be kidding me. Here's this guy, Tucker Carlson, who all of these guys that I've just laid out to you have given all sorts of credence to, and they all basically work off of their algorithms. And again, I'm talking about top flight journalists like Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi, who no longer have any credibility because of this, in my opinion. And then, the lesser thans in terms of their journalistic chops, but, in terms of their comedic sort of ability to get, people's eyeballs on stuff and actually ask questions, Russel Brand and Jimmy Dore and several others, yeah, okay, worthwhile, but they just destroyed all credibility, which I knew they didn't have for a long time anyway, and I continue to say that on my feeds and so forth, but then moving through the whole process, right? But going back to Tucker Carlson and this guy, Larry Sinclair, I watched this interview and I didn't want to because I watched it, reluctantly, and again, you got to understand who I am in this whole thing. I do not respect, I have no interest. I have no sort of ideological compunction or parallel to Barack Obama. I know who Barack Obama is from where I'm coming from. And what Barack Obama allowed was he was the master of grift. He came in writing, this populist mandate of hope and change we could believe in, which I knew were platitudes, but he kept saying he was going to basically purge corruption. He was going to get the lobbyists out of the White House and so on and so forth. But what ultimately happens? The first African-American president in the United States history who was as brilliant and charismatic as they come, and his oratory skills are like nothing any of us have ever heard. He was the right guy at the right time, and he looked to all of us that he was going to become like this FDR moment. Instead, he put everybody in the cabinet that created the absolute global contagion that was the economic financial crisis of 2008. Why? Because it was a puppet. We didn't know it at the time. We were buying it. There was one moment where he said the only thing standing between me and the CEOs and the pitchforks, the only thing standing between the CEOs and the pitchforks of a populist uprising because of the 2008 great financial crisis was him. And meanwhile, him and Eric Holder, the first African-American attorney general in the United States, wound up doing this insane dance where they allowed the ultimate coup d'etat and corruption of the CEOs of our financial system to get away with the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that never ended, that I have brought you all the details. Because, again, I'm not Jesus, I'm not Moses, I'm the producer. And all of that is in The Con, the blueprint for everything that we're dealing with, www.thecon.tv, which Matt Taibbi is the only one out of all of the people that I've mentioned so far who literally knows what I'm talking about and knows it for a long time exponentially beyond what I did, but then I passed him because it just took years and years and years to get this. And I've got so much more information that I still have on the shelves because this entire system is owned and regulated by the shadow forces of our financial sector that use what I continue to tell you because of what Barack Obama and Holder allowed, which was the gang rape of the middle class and quite frankly of the African Americans of this country. 55% of African American household wealth evaporated because of what Obama and Holder allowed Wall Street to get away with. And how did they allow them to get away with it? Well, as we're seeing demonstrated with all things Donald Trump, the guiltiest pig-faced motherfucker who is a reflection in like karma I have ever seen in my life, because he's the embodiment of everything that I'm revealing to you and that the government is demonstrating now he's guilty of. In a nutshell, Donald Trump is guilty of defrauding the United States through racketeering using documentation fraud and corrupt attorneys and judges. That's really what it comes down to. And everything else is detail, but that's the overview. And that he's got to go down. And he's going to go down if the system doesn't collapse first. But meanwhile, what I'm telling you is, yeah, the insurrection was a coup d'etat, and it was a white supremacist coup d'etat, and it had billionaires in play like the Mercers and whoever was in the pockets of the Kochs, and how they executed this whole thing with Steve Bannon, and most importantly, Eric Prince, Mr. freaking mercenary Blackwater, who probably has, guys that could put a freaking bullet in my head yesterday if they wanted to take me out, and they haven't yet, and I'm not sure why. But the bottom line is that Eric Prince and all of these guys were in on it. How in the world did Trump Stain, who's the biggest idiot I've ever seen in my life, ever be the master of the brainchild of the insurrection? He wasn't. He's just an all-star Russel or idiot, that basically loves to get a picture of his mugshot and sell it to raise money for his legal fees. That's who Donald Trump is. A guy that had Trump stakes and Trump mortgages and Trump University, and he was involved. The only thing that Trump could have possibly brought to the table was the lessons that he learned that you could lie on documentation fraud to be able to get loans approved that his business was operating under. Most importantly, his real estate business, which he was doing all day, every day, which is part of what we show you called control fraud. But getting back to Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson puts this guy up, last night. And again, I got to remember this guy's name. I'm trying to put it out of my head because he's such a scumbag. But this guy, Larry Sinclair, is talking about how he provided, I don't know, he gave like some cab driver in Obama $250 to go get cocaine, which Obama put into a pipe like crack. And then they had crazy ass sex for 2 days and he knew who he was and all of this other kind of stuff. Even if all of that happened, for example, there's no evidence from Tucker Carlson that happened. It's just fucking one guy saying it happened, and the guy, as it turns out, is a fraud for like the last 20 years and all sorts of things, which Tucker doesn't talk about. He says, oh yeah, you admitted everything, so everybody's got to go look at it. But what they just wanted to say was Barack Obama was this sex fiend gay guy, which plays to all of these fears of all of these strange people on the right that are always projecting sex trafficking while ironically ignoring the fact that Donald Trump was providing the masseuses for Epstein through Mar-a-Lago. And he got his wife in some sort of horse trade with Epstein, and that's who Melania is, okay? But yet they're projecting. I've got a theory that everybody in this MAGA universe, which I consider kind of like a venereal disease, they must have all been molested, by their priest or their parents or some weird ass stuff. They say they're just obsessed with this stuff, but it's just like, oh yeah, we know somebody's up to no good. Kind of like this guy, Larry Sinclair, was like, yeah, I used to fuck everybody. I fucked the black guys down to the, they were former slaves and this and that, and I know how these guys operate, and we like to do drugs and have fun. And I was down in Miami doing crack in the 80s. And yeah, that guy's got credibility that's going to land on Tucker Carlson's interview, that's going to land on X with the support of the world's richest man, Elon Musk, who I thought for 10 years was a hero, a guy, responsible for transformative energy paradigmatic change with performance in Tesla and X, which requires incredible precision, which means the guy, even if he is surrounded by geniuses, he himself had to be a genius, but he never got to that point without the support of the government of the United States, particularly the Obama administration. But here we are, the guy debt finances X, who knows who his silent partners are in this whole thing. And, they buy it from Jack Dorsey and they come up with this whole, censorship thing was a big deal. And, obviously Matt Taibbi and his cohorts go to Capitol Hill to talk about it, probably meaningfully, because I'm sure the CIA and the FBI are very much into censorship. And I know I've been censored, but I'm absolutely certain I've been censored by Elon Musk above all else. And ultimately, everything that I continue to tell you is I've got the $29 trillion truth that can take this whole thing down. There's 1,000 billion and a trillion. What I've got that nobody else will tell you and nobody else has, and nobody has credibility, I'm the only one who has the credibility. Why? Because Federal Reserve Act 13.3, which is the lender of last resort capacity of the Federal Reserve to be used in moments of crisis, were utilized to backstop the largest criminal conspiracy and grift in the history of the world, using all of the elements that the United States government is demonstrating that Donald Trump is guilty of, only to the tune of tens of millions, hundreds of millions, that destroyed hundreds of millions of people and led to the system that destroyed everybody, that got away with tens of trillions of dollars, and the government wasn't used to take it all down, which is why I had to make the con, because I knew they were pissing on my head telling me it was rain. They must have thought I was some kind of new fool, because the greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he didn't exist. And then, in the end of all of this stuff, because of all this hysteria, you see this anti-Semitic thing trending on Twitter, and Elon Musk is going to sue the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, for preventing him from 60% of sales, corporate sales on Meanwhile, Twitter has become what I call a hate vector. And I got into this battle with a bunch of MAGAs yesterday who are so stupid they're a venereal disease that they don't even know what it means to be a vector, which is a pathway, which is a way you are able to spread lies and disseminate hate and that sort of thing through this technology. And you prey upon the ultimate weakness of the ignorant, which is always to push sideways or down because their lives are so miserable and they're so fucking pathetic that they can't see the forest for the trees. So they become basically the same type of scenario that we saw in Nazi Germany, which I happen to be an expert in. Joseph Goebbels in propaganda said all of these villainous things about the Jews that ultimately led to what became, the Third Reich and the Holocaust and everything else. But here's what's so sickening about all of this, right? So, I dropped the truth bomb yesterday on anti-Semitism, which I recorded a while back. And I'm Jewish. I'm from a mixed family, and I'm not really religious, but at the same time, I'm culturally Jewish. But I really, 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 really am committed to history. And quite frankly, the thing that speaks to me above all else is Moses and Exodus and liberation and Deuteronomy and all of the nature of the law, which is what that's all about, against tyranny, the pharaohs. The same story, like David Byrne, the prophet, said, same as it ever was. And the bottom line is that the nature of the anti-Semitic lawsuit by deep-pocketed Elon Musk, who got that much money primarily from pump and dump schemes and all sorts of control fraud that not he himself, to my knowledge, was engaged in, but obviously the entire financial system pumped his net worth up to gazillions. And now he's so insanely rich that he doesn't give a flying fuck about losing 40 billion here or 20 billion there. He's kind of having fun like he's Caligula. Look, because he's a sick fuck. That's what money does to people. It perverts. When you've got too much money and that much power, you become sick. You become like almost a sycophant of yourself, because it's just like all of this stuff that we're seeing in Trump and we're seeing with all of these, bottom feeders like Tucker Carlson, through everybody that I've mentioned in this whole thing. And it's all based on lies, libel, and defamation, and everything that they're doing. Because I'm a producer, and to produce the kind, we produce the revelations of the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that reveals the dons of Wall Street, who have the most important attorneys on the planet. And we had to cross our T's and dot our I's, and we were able to get it out of their public, or we'd be sued for libel beyond comprehension. And we never, see the light of day, but we did it by the book and correct, and we had it backsourced and cited and everything so by the book that it was, when you've got the truth, you're bulletproof. And that's the story. But what we didn't have, and because of the nature of what I'm telling you, with Federal Reserve Act 13.3, which provided tens of trillions of dollars illegally, backdoored by our financial system, and then the media and our government, worked in the smoke and mirrors, ultimately they did so against the statutes of what ultimately the whole Federal Reserve is premised on in the first place, not to mention what I've been talking about in my truth bombs and my podcast and everything else, that I've got the evidence that former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan had all the evidence to take down this massive racket many, many years in advance, because of he was mandated by Congress to regulate predatory lending through what's known as the Homeowner Equity Protection Act. That's where the buck stopped. And then, of course, when the House of Cards collapsed and the ceiling collapsed on everybody, the media went to Alan Greenspan, and he's like, nobody could see this coming. He had all of the evidence to stop it, and it was job to stop it, but he didn't, and he allowed it all to happen, only to have the Federal Reserve basically shift him out and have Ben Bernanke come in with Hank Paulson, and then, at that time, Timothy Geithner under Obama, who raped and pillaged the United States, metaphorically, especially African Americans, ultimately that destroyed tens of millions of people and their lives and their ability to make money in their refuge. And it's created collateral damage, the likes of which Osama bin Laden could never dream of. And yesterday, we've got this platform X, threatening to sue the ADL, which is doing all sorts of weird shit, because I did say this in my anti-Semitism truth bomb. Yeah, there's a lot of really bad Jewish guys that are part and parcel, that are responsible for all the shit that I'm telling you, and are guilty of the wazoo, and should be so much that should happen to them. But they didn't do it because they're Jewish. They did it because they're greedy pigs and fucking assholes, and that is the point. All of these people, whether it's Obama, whether it's Phil and Kamala Harris, for example, black, white, indifferent, everybody that's in the machine was in on this. And what I'm trying to do desperately is to make the truth more potent, more powerful, more important than this cacophony of lies. It's biblical. And maybe I am the deliverer. Maybe. But I did the work. Again, I'm not Moses, I'm not Jesus, but I am the producer. And what I have got to convince you of, I believe in a market economy. I believe in entrepreneurialism. I don't believe in exploitation. I don't believe in monopoly. I believe in entrepreneurial, a rising tide raises all ships, and dynamism. Why? Because I'm an athlete, because I played football, because I was very good at it, in rugby, and a very good action sports athlete. I know the difference between actually doing something and doing it very well versus pretending like you can do it and lying about it, which is all this fucking bullshit is. It's a bunch of losers that can never achieve anything in their life, lying and distorting and distracting for what? The oldest trick in the book. The easiest thing to do is you got to blame somebody for your failure. So you go blame what? Those that you think are less than you. Blacks, women, Jews, that's all stupid. And then the worst part of it is blacks, women, and Jews play ball with this, which is kind of like some version of the Stockholm Syndrome. So I'm asking you, please check out my work, www.thecon.tv. Check out the new Untouchables on the Real Progressives. You just do a Google search. But most importantly, I'm trying to raise capital to be able to get these truths out there. Honestly, if I had $10 million in my war chest, I could go right now and probably within a week, I could figure out everything with this Larry Sinclair, Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk situation and blow it to high heaven. Yeah, I could just move it like that. I've got so much more corruption. I mean, this corruption that we're just talking about, what I just said, is child's play compared to what it is that I've got in the con. And by the way, the con is child's play to what we got right before in the SNL crisis. My mentor, the guy that taught us all this stuff, is a guy who's the greatest criminologist. He's the Michael Jordan of financial crime in the history of the United States, a guy by the name of Bill Black. And there's so many more like him. Guys, we are not this stupid. We cannot allow the ignorance of this insanity to curse our country into fascism. Corruption burns and fuels fascism. So that's why I'm asking you, please invest $13 in this campaign for truth, to raise the details of how the entire system from the Supreme Court and Congress and judiciary and appellate courts all around the country destroyed tens of millions of people doing the exact same thing that the government is demonstrating that Donald Trump did. It can't be either or. You can't cherry pick. You can't be a Rachel Maddow situation in this. The entire system of media has no credibility. This is a sinking ship. This is every children's parable there is. It's some combination of Humpty Dumpty and ultimately the Emperor's New Clothes. And I'm telling you exactly how this whole thing works and who's guilty. And when you know the truth, you will not be prey to lies and deception. You'll be that courageous "What's up, Doc?" Bugs Bunny character that opens up a can of spinach like Popeye to open up a can of whoop ass on this stupidity that is going to destroy us. Why? Because everything's on the line. Our democracy's on the line. The integrity of law is on the line. The dynamism of a free market's on the line. The ability for the humanity to rise to the level to solve the problems of fossil fuel and all of the stuff that this idiot Ramik Yamaswamy, or Vivek, I think you pronounce his name, Ramaswamy, this guy is Elizabeth Holmes 2.0, which I've been passing around as a meme on Twitter or X. This guy, Ramik Yamaswamy, he's a libertarian lab rat. This guy is Elizabeth Holmes, but baked in the Koch brothers situation, and he's claiming that the climate, what is it? What do they call it? He doesn't say climate change isn't real. He says that the climate agenda is a hoax. Okay, whatever that fucking means. All he's trying to do is just increase, drilling and so forth. And by the way, for all of you out there who think that the United States produces more oil and gas than anybody on the fucking planet, FYI. Okay? And yeah, climate change is real. We've been dealing with these lies since Exxon smothered this stuff back in the 70s, and everything is connected to it. Guys, we are way past the revolution. We are way past the great, awakening. And any asshole who wants to say that woke is a joke, it's only a joke because you get into trans, you get in all of these things that, yeah, it's important to some people, but it's not the economic paradigm in which all life depends on, which ultimately the integrity of law has been sabotaged by people that are corrupt. Why? Because we gave tens of trillions of dollars to a corrupt system that pulled the coup d'etat in 2009, of which unfortunately Barack Obama allowed. And do I think Barack Obama is gay, a crack guy that would do all of this shit? No, I don't. But at the same time, would I be ultra surprised if the evidence exists? I might go, yeah, maybe some of that makes sense. But the point is, you got to produce the fucking evidence. And then if you don't, and you do all of this stuff, it's just in service to everything that is designed for libel, everything that is designed for, sabotaging someone's reputation through, the variables of manipulation. What can I think of the legal term? And I've said it like 4 or 5 times. All of this shit's illegal, people, as is deceptive acts and practices to be able to lie on a grand scale so that you can loot the Federal Reserve. That's corrupt. The Supreme Court is corrupt. The Federal Reserve is corrupt. Congress is corrupt. The only thing we can do is to create a tidal wave populist crusade to purge corruption, and that's who I am. I'm a modern day Bob Geldof. I'm going to create this national barnstorming tour if I can raise your awareness through your investment to be able to give us the opportunity to show you the information that we have to meet millions of Americans out where they live in all the biggest cities of the United States, culminating with Washington, D.C. under the gaze of Abraham Lincoln, who said, a nation formed by the people shall not perish from the earth. That's who Patrick Lovell is, man. I'm the producer. Failure is not an option. Rise, roar, revolt, onwards and upwards.